We all want equality. We all want to be loved. We all want to have the full potential and opportunity to grow and to participate fully in our societies.
As a teenager, I suffered myself with eating disorders.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Stephanie Mehta. I am the new editor-in-chief of Fast Company magazine.
Yes.
And it is my great pleasure to introduce Sophie Grégoire Trudeau.
Thank you for having me.
We have so many young people in the audience this morning, and we're going to be hearing from some young activists later today. You have made girls a very important part of your platform as wife of the Prime Minister of Canada. Tell us a little bit about the youth in Canada right now and what drew you to girls' issues as a platform.
Well, what drew me is my own experience, and every cell in my body told me that as a young girl, when I was suffering from eating disorders, I was looking for my true self. I was looking for truths within me and wanted to know why I was suffering. And I started this path way before I met my husband. And being on the political arena and having a greater platform, it's just a natural extension of the work that I had begun before, talking about self-esteem and girls. And now, obviously, whenever we talk about equality on our planet, we also talk about the involvement of boys and how they are also, they can be stuck in a notion of a toxic kind of masculinity. So I think that it's really important that we are empowering youth in Canada and all over the world, because you're not leading tomorrow, you're leading now, today, in the actions that you take in your daily lives. And sometimes I feel like the political process and governments feel so far away from young people. And it is not the political process, it is your political process. And we need your voices. We need young people to get engaged, and we need to listen to them and see how they feel about the world. And not only that, we need to have complex, sometimes awkward conversations that are based on truth. Because on this planet right now, the truth is in danger on many levels. And when human beings distance themselves from their own inner truth and from the truth around them, we can't see ourselves in our true light. And that is that is to our detriment. That is, yes. When youth live in fear of not being able to become who they are as adults, they can't become the creative beings that we are meant to be on this planet. And when we can't express our uniqueness as human beings and our creativity, we don't allow our progress to take root. So this youth empowerment is related to the future of this humanity. It is of utmost importance.
Do you see a difference between the youth of today and your experiences growing up? There does seem to be this youthquake, which is the title of a future session we're going to be hearing about today. Is there a youthquake happening, and are you seeing it in Canada?
We're seeing it. We're definitely seeing it. I think that young people are realizing that they have lived in a culture, and it depends where you live in the world, but still, globally, social media, the general message that is out there is quite paradoxical, because we're asking youth, go for it, be yourselves, conquer the world. But at the same time, what does that mean when you're bombarded with images and messages of this is what you should look like, this is what you should act like? It's like there's like a dichotomy there that is quite unsettling, and it's a recipe for unhappiness. The more you distance yourself from who you are and your authentic self, the less chances you have to become the person that you want to flourish into and contribute to this world. So I think that young people are being more aware of what makes them suffer. And when I speak, because I do lots of volunteer work with young people, because they inspire me so much, and I think it's so important that older people and younger people collaborate, because we have this generational gap where, we don't usually live with our grandparents under the same roof, but there's so much collaboration to be encouraged there, and that is enriching to youth and to the elderly as well. So I think that, well, I'm not considering myself elderly yet, but we all get there, don't we? So I think that it is essential that we collaborate to remind ourselves that, first of all, the obsession with youth and eternal life physically, is not a recipe for happiness. And we need to talk about the real stuff, because the languages, the images, and the pervasive violence, especially towards women and girls that youth are faced with, has a huge impact on boys and girls, and it is not positive. And I think that people are realizing more and more, and we need to have those conversations, whether it's from self-image to social media to the prevalence and the excessive use of pornography. We need to be talking about the real things that people face in their real lives, because real change comes from real individuals and real experiences. And it doesn't just happen because it's time in a country, change must happen, or there's a crisis going on. Change happens because people get engaged in the process. And I think youth are getting more and more engaged, and this is great news. Don't stop. Don't stop.
Speaking of difficult conversations, you referenced earlier an eating disorder when you were a teenager. What prompted you to open up about that, and what has the reaction been?
You know, eating disorders, like any other kind of compulsions, are kind of like the tip of the iceberg. If you talk about alcoholism, for example, lots of people will say, you know, it's only 5% of the problem. It is the fear and the anxiety that are underlying that are the most important. When I suffered, I suffered, and the hopelessness and the helplessness that you feel at some point is overwhelming. And when I made the decision that I was going to talk about it, I was working in the newsroom, and I was a public personality in Quebec. And I did ask myself, whoa, is this the right decision? Because there's going to be a backlash. It's probably the best decision, that when you share your story and become vulnerable, the ripple effect and the people that you can help along the way is a life lesson. And when I spoke out, the response was amazing. There's always the same minority of people who would criticize you, and now I'm in politics, so trust me, I know about that. We need to distance ourselves from the negativity in our societies and from ourselves as well. I often ask everyone, what is the inner conversation that you have when you wake up in the morning, you know, or when you're alone and nobody's watching? Just think about it for 1 second, or think about it this week or tomorrow. What is the inner conversation? Is it compassionate, peaceful? Do you tell yourself, God, I did well. I'm really good at this. I can push even further, and I know I can do it. And I'm healthy. I have a healthy body. I can move around. I can discover life. Or is it always comparing yourself to other people, not feeling good enough, tall enough, more beautiful enough, or whatever it is that our path of suffering is? We need to be honest with ourselves and take an honest look at ourselves and have an inner conversation where we are more at peace with ourselves, because when we start that, self-care allows you to lead a life that you don't need to escape from. And compulsions are escapes. We are called, yes, right? I have chills because I know it resonates. I can feel it from all of you. And, you know, we don't know each other personally, but on our paths of discovery and suffering, whatever it is, there's not much that a human being hasn't gone through or heard about or knows somebody who's gone through it. Through our paths of suffering, we unite. And the more we tell our stories and the more we raise our own voices, the more we allow the other people to raise their voices. And I think that this cycle has started, and it is good news.
I wanted to ask you about an instance where you raised your voice and received a little bit of a negative backlash. On International Women's Day, you posted on social media, I think we're going to show it, a picture of yourself with the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, which would seem innocuous enough, but it turned out to be controversial.
Shocking. It's so shocking.
So for those of you who can't read it, it says, this week as we mark International Women's Day, let's celebrate the boys and men in our lives who encourage us to be who we truly are, who treat girls and women with respect, and who aren't afraid to speak up in front of others.
Yes. Yes.
Now, for those of you who did not follow the controversy, there were some people who felt that on International Women's Day, we should be honoring women, not men. What was your response to that criticism? And was it your intention to spark a dialogue?
It's always my intention to inspire and spark a dialogue. What are we here for? This is a human experience. First of all, controversy. There are worse things. I think that, first of all, I'm a women's rights advocate, and I have been for 15, 20 years. And people know this. So obviously on International Women's Day, we are celebrating the amazing efforts and sacrifices that women have made before us, and us standing here making more efforts to pave the way so that future generations can see higher and further and wider. But gender equality and feminism cannot evolve in our humanity if we're not bringing our boys and men along. There is no doubt that women and children right now on this planet are the people who suffer the most on many levels. And there is so much data, research, and science now to allow us to see ourselves as we truly are. What is happening on the planet? Where is the data? How many women are suffering? We know that we could add $12 trillion to a global GDP by 2025 if we invested in more in advancing women's equality. So can you imagine the opportunity right now that we are sitting on, that we are watching happen in a way? Women and girls have been living for too many years in a toxic definition of what it is to be female and to be a woman. Lots of boys around this planet are being taught right now as we speak that girls are lesser than them. This is toxic to everybody, and it's toxic to boys, and boys deserve better. They deserve better than to grow up in a society that teaches them to be only strong, only courageous, dominant, and ego-centered. They deserve more than this because they're amazing creatures. They are amazing creatures who have the capacity to become open-minded, open-hearted, courageous, and strong, and tender, and wise human beings. And let's not underestimate their potential, because it is only together that we will be able to reach more harmony in a society and more balance in our own communities everywhere on this planet. I'm glad you agree. Phew.
The Prime Minister has identified himself as a feminist, proudly, and that has also sparked an interesting reaction. As we think about having more men and boys engaged in the conversation, engaged in the act of being equal partners in the fight for women's rights, what lessons might there be from the Prime Minister speaking out and saying he's a feminist?
That's a great question. Well, first of all, big deal saying you're a feminist. It should be, it should be normal, right? Yes. So I'm like, all right, baby, next step. What else are you going to say?
What is the next step?
The next steps are not our words. Language is very important, don't get me wrong. It is very important. And language that boys and men at the kitchen table, in our own communities, in schools, in the schoolyards, everywhere, in the workplace, the language that boys and men use to describe and talk about their fellow humans, women and girls, is extremely important. Language is extremely important. Yes, yes. And the next steps are, what do we do in our daily lives to create equality within? And I had a lot of conversations with my husband where I was, because he's obviously teaching. I have 3 kids. I have a 4-year-old boy, Ella Grace, who's 9, my daughter, and my eldest boy, who's 10. And obviously he teaches Ella everything that he teaches the boys. But I tell him, yes, that's what feminism is about, but you have to make sure that by being yourself, and he is an open-hearted individual, you are teaching your boys to become as well. The vulnerability that a human being shows in early stages of life will allow that person to flourish in a much more peaceful way, with less repressed emotions and more vulnerability and openness. And I think that when and this is Gloria Steinem who says it all the time, but I'm stealing it from her and she knows. When we say that human beings, we're not supposed to be ranked, we're supposed to be linked. We're not supposed to be divided, we're supposed to be united. And it is the only recipe, and it's not easy, and there are always going to be people who will, not follow. Well, let us send them even more love and compassion. And let us use the best nature and the best angels of our nature, and trust that our inherent qualities as human beings are good. Because when you start believing that within yourself, your circle changes, because we kind of become what we bring our attention to. What do we consume every day? And does it make us happy? That is huge. Yes, those are huge questions, because our daily actions are the sign of, are we creating equality within and balance within? And I really think that when people say, yes, but you know what, Sophie, you have a voice, you have a stage, people are listening. True, and I take it very responsibly and very seriously. But real change comes from real people, from real experiences, and it starts in the home. And we have responsibilities in our homes that shine out into this world, and we should take them seriously.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about how you deal with this very high-profile role, because in addition to being the spouse of the Prime Minister, you've married into a very high-profile, prominent Canadian family. How do you cope with the pressure? How do you deal with that kind of spotlight?
And we've been together for 15 years. This is not how I see it. But we're grounded people. My husband was brought up with both feet in respect and grounded into Mother Earth. And we bow to this life and these opportunities that have been given to us. And we see it as a gift to connect with other human beings. And when you start on a path of creating goodness for others, I see it as a path of service. This is what we're here to do. It is the path. And it's crazy work. It's crazy. But it's good crazy. And it's enriching through the relationship building that we do. And in Canada right now, we are facing many opportunities that are just amazing, and we're changing policies that are very new for our country. Whether it's the new parental leave, 5 weeks added to the maternal leave that we just added for fathers. Yeah. Take it or leave it. So they're really, encouraged to do it, and it's people have responded with great enthusiasm. I think that we need to create moral equality in the home. Men and women have to share more chores. Yes. And I think that fathers should also spend a lot of time with kids. There have been many moments in our history where fathers and mothers were creating proximity with their kids. We need that. The human body needs that proximity. We need to create that proximity within ourselves and within our societies because we lived so detached now because of information and technology, which is great because we can communicate with a family at the end of the world and keep each other posted. But it's also creating physical distance, and that proximity in human beings is necessary to calm our nervous systems, actually. So it's quite interesting how we are at such turning points where we can create, through the distance that we live in, more proximity. And social media does allow us to do this, but then again, it has another side of the coin that we have to be very careful with. But we are also in Canada, what we're doing now is that we have an international feminist assistance policy, which means that every decision that we make as a government is looked at through a gender lens. And we want to make sure that we answer the needs of the people who are the most vulnerable, i.e. Women and children right now on the planet. So there are opportunities for governments and for people right now to do really good things, and I think that we're taking the good first steps.
We have just 1 minute left. Yesterday, many of us heard from former Secretary of State and former First Lady Hillary Clinton. I have to ask, do you have any political aspirations?
I am in the political sphere. I'm also very much involved in my children's life. I am a mother, and I love to take care of other human beings. I mean, it's not a definite no, because I never say no to anything. You never know in life. But right now, I think that the path of service through the political arena, through what my husband does, for now is enough to handle. Yes.
Well, it's been a very inspiring 20 minutes. Thank you so much, Sophie Grégoire Trudeau.
Thank you, everybody.